Welcome to the Art of Being Nimble podcast. I'm Glenn Smith and I'm your host. In this series, we'll introduce you to business leaders from around the world who will interview about how they've overcome challenges of operating a business in today's dynamic world. Through their stories, we're going to hear about what problems they've had and how they fixed them and the benefits it's brought them. Importantly, you're going to learn some lessons about what you can then use in your organisation to do similar things. So let's get on with the show and hear the next story. Today on The Art of Being Nimble, I'm thrilled to welcome Charlie Fleet, an executive leader whose career has been a fantastic journey through complex transformations and operational challenges. With a master's degree from MIT and a track record of driving strategic change in industries ranging from financial services to telecoms, Charlie brings a wealth of insights that are not just theoretical, but grounded in real-world applications. He's helped global organizations achieve meaningful transformation through mergers and acquisitions, agile operational improvements, or aligning diverse teams to a common purpose. Charlie takes us through his 15 years of being told he was broken before realizing his true superpower, running towards the problems that others avoid. Hear how he cracked the code of aligning leadership, connecting vision to frontline work, and instilling a culture of continuous improvement, all while rocking some delightfully non-conformist job titles. This conversation demonstrates what is needed to make operations as streamlined and impactful as possible. So let's dive in. Welcome, Charlie. Welcome to the show. With an introduction like that, it does seem like you're a bit of a transformation expert. How did that come about?
I spent 15 years being told I was broken.
You were broken.
I was. If I didn't focus, I was never going to go anywhere in my career. That was consistently what I got from every mentor, every boss, anybody who ever saw my work. And what was funny was all the while I was getting promoted, I was getting new opportunities, I was getting, I was having fun doing great work, and those two things kind of coexisted. And it was only about 15 years in that I realized, wait a second. No, this is what I do for a living. I run into situations that either no one else feels comfortable or wants to run into, and I figure out what's going on. I find out what's going on with the team. I find out what's disconnected between them, and then we get to work. And I set up operational processes that generally improve the organization, and then get called on to the next opportunity, the next big thing.
I love that, running at problems that other people don't want to run towards. What was the moment, though, that you sort of did that realization? You said it was, a few years in, but can you remember the moment that you go, that penny dropped for you?
I don't know at 15 years exactly when it was, but I think about my first experience. I was on a client for telecommunication software, and we had about 17 people that did code configuration management. We did war room support. We did build and packaging for all of our software for these major companies. Mm-hmm. And we went from 17 people to 4 because it was the bust after the the dot-com bust, and all these telcos were just struggling. And I just remember thinking, we're never going to make it. Like, it's never going to happen. We can't do this work. 17 people was what it took. How can 4 do it? And I remember panicking and just being overwhelmed. And what was funny is, you fast forward about 6 to 12 months, I was kind of like, I was looking at all the heavy work that I had to do. I was like, wait a second, a lot of this could be automated. Like, I could automate this. And within about 9 to 12 months, I was maybe working an hour or 2 a day, because we had automated everything, and we were so lost in all working so hard that we didn't realize there was opportunities to improve. There was opportunity to redeploy our efforts to areas that were higher value. And so I think that was kind of the first lesson that I had, is that even in the worst of situations, there's always some type of like silver lining, or there's always some type of opportunity that maybe hadn't presented itself that does.
Yeah. I'm definitely with you. Silver linings always exist. You sometimes have to look quite hard to find them.
Well, I mean, and it was traumatic. I mean, a lot of people lost their job. A lot of folks went on to great other opportunities. But it was hard. It was painful. But that opportunity would have never presented itself if we hadn't had such a forcing function like losing major clients during the recession.
Well, it's true what they say, isn't it? Necessity is the mother of invention. And back then, automation, I mean, we talk about automation today in the world of AI that we live in, and we think, oh, yes, automation. But back then, that was a big thing.
It was before DevOps was a thing, CI/CD pipelines, all that stuff. We use Perl. It's Python now is the new Perl, I guess. We coded all these things and all these mainframe systems and Microsoft Windows platforms, and we intertangled them all so that we could just generate all of the deliverables that needed to be done without us having to interact with the systems. It could do it all if you really studied what was happening, if you looked at the core processes. It was all automatable, and we just didn't see it.
Amazing. So 15 years in, you noticed that actually I'm a transformation guy.
Yeah.
What happened after that?
I started taking on titles like strategic operations director, which is just made up. And I think I've had a made up title pretty much ever since then. Chief Transformation Officer was a recent one. It wasn't that the job was made up. It's that the title is non-conforming because, the one that really it's more attuned to is like operations. People haven't quite gotten there. That operations and transformation, they're kind of merging. They're kind of turning into one single stream. That operations are no longer about making every day look perfectly like the last with no variability whatsoever. Operations are about looking at the systems every day, thinking about how can it be better, thinking about what could I improve, what waste could I take out. And so, I think I see my role, the titles I'm using are moving more towards operations, but the title is it doesn't as much matter. It's more about what's the work that I do.
So I when you hear I'm the titles are sort of non-conforming, is that because they fit you as a non-conforming sort of guy, and is that your superpower for making transformation and operations as streamlined as they need to be?
Maybe. I mean, a lot of people are non-conforming. Maybe we all are non-conforming in some element. I think in the professional world, a lot of hiring managers or HR professionals, they try and they always want to put you in a box. Are you salesperson? Are you dev? You coder? Are you an HR? Are you an accountant? Right? They need to get you in a box. And I think for some disciplines, yeah, that may well be that's the case. But I see increasingly, people talk about T-shape and pie shape and all of these pieces. Increasingly, the folks that are having the most fun in their career, that are actually getting new opportunities, that are learning and thriving in a professional workplace, it's those that are a little bit more broad in what they can bring, not just in their technical skill sets, but in things like emotional quotient and other pieces. I see that as more. People are thriving more if the more of a rounded skill set that you end up having. And I think for me, I'm just one of the folks that are kind of in that population of having technical skills, having executive presence, having personal connections, having operational rigor and attention to detail in the appropriate times. I've been able, because I've had so many opportunities, I guess, to try those skills on and get to know them better and get a little better at them.
So I know you've been spending some time and you've articulated already about improving the operations. Maybe we should dig into that a little bit, because obviously transformation is in itself is a means to an end. We transform for a purpose, but it's the operations that need to transform.
Yeah. I mean, look, transformation. There's all kinds of opinions on this, and I think sometimes they can be overdone. Transformation's really, I think, only about three things. Really, it's about understanding, okay, if that's where we want to go and we need to transform, like I want to run the Boston Marathon, you're going to have to transform this body if you're going to want to run the Boston Marathon. But so if you think about it in a work context, it's really about, three things. One is getting alignment in the leadership team around the vision of where you're going. Without that, you can't go anywhere. And the second thing is, for all of the teams involved and the people involved, making sure there's a connection with that vision to the work that people actually do. It's the work we're doing today in service of that vision. That's it. Like, simple. And the third one is, when we do work, make sure that we do work well. Make the improvements, learn how to continuously improve, inspect our work, reflect it for periods of time, and get just a little bit better each time. So alignment, connection, and improvement. And with those three things, any organization can transform. You don't need transformation programs, but you do need to have these three essential kind of ingredients.
So maybe we should walk through them a little bit in turn and just explore them a little bit. So let's start with at the front then. Alignment leadership. I know I've seen lots of challenges running transformations where the leadership are not aligned, and actually
we've never been in organizations like that, Glenn.
No, never.
Yeah.
But what's your go-to things to do or to explore to test how aligned the leadership are or not, as the case may be?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is its own podcast of executive alignment and vision. When you think about alignment, it's one thing to have a deck that quarterly the leadership comes out and says, this is our vision. And then you spend an hour and everyone just goes away. But when you look at organizations that really do have a connection, that vision and where you're going in your organization, it shows up weekly. It shows up daily. It shows up in the behaviors of the leadership team. They bring that back and they ask questions like to their team, hey, is the work you're doing connected to this vision? Because a lot of times what you have, especially as organizations start to grow beyond 10, 15, 20 people, beyond, and you start to get divisions, a lot of times leaders who aren't aligned will then take their own personal incentives, their own personal beliefs, and they'll break away from that vision, and they try and then confiscate or take over their resources in whatever they feel, even if it's not in alignment. And so if the organization, if that leadership team can't challenge each other around, hey, Jim, doesn't look like the work that your team is doing is in service of our vision. If you can't have that conversation within the leadership team, you don't have health. And so I think, you really have to look at how the team is behaving, how often is it in front of them, and how then, for the second part, is the connection of the work. That's a symptom of if you don't have connected work to the vision, that's a symptom of a dysfunctional leadership team.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because I think there's often a misconception across enterprises that the leadership have got it all sorted, and at the end of the day, and at the end of the day, they're a team like anyone else, and they can be just as productive or dysfunctional, as you said, as anyone else. And more often than not, I say I'm a consultant, so I have a twisted worldview. That they don't feel capable of holding each other to account.
Well, I think it's harder to hold each other to account because the nature of your job is a lot different. As your responsibilities grow, let's say you're the owner of a small business or you're the head of a division, you might have dozens, hundreds, possibly thousands of resources available to you. And having been in a position to be responsible for that kind of headcount, one of the things I learned when I was in that position was you don't know as much as everyone else thinks you do.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah. Because you're not doing the work on a day-to-day basis. You go visit with the teams. But when you visit with teams, a lot of times they cover up maybe what they think they should be covering up. They're not as open and honest about, what's actually going on. And so it's actually sometimes very, very hard to have command of a division or an area because you're just not close enough to the work anymore. And so then a lot of times if you have individuals who themselves are not as connected to the work and then not as healthy in relationship with one another, that's where you start to see a lot of dysfunction, where everyone's just trying, they're working their hardest, but maybe they're working on partial information, or and they get blamed for, oh, they're working on ego. Well, maybe sometimes that's all they got, because they don't have the information, and it's a signal. You got to focus on that.
Yeah. As you were talking, it reminds me of that sort of old adage, that royalty think the world smells of new paint, because wherever they go, they see the shiny version of the world.
Right.
And so if you're the leader in doing the go see, you don't necessarily see people don't necessarily feel empowered or comfortable sharing the problems.
Right.
And yeah.
Well, and I think actually, if someone said, Charlie, what is the one thing you could do to help with leadership alignment? I think it's situational dependent, but probably the one that covers the most is something like Lencioni's 5 Dysfunctions. Simple fable.
Love that book.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's a simple read. You can do it in a day or two. It takes me a week, but I'm a slow reader. And what's great about it is it shows how vulnerability-based trust actually is critical in team health. And if you're a leader and you want to get the best out of your teams, well, you're going to get the best out of their teams if they're comfortable giving you information without fear of it being used against them. And that's at the core of vulnerability-based trust. So it works within a leadership team directly. It also works with the environment that you create. You can extend it out to psychological safety and all these other concepts, but at its core, one thing, vulnerability-based trust and Lencioni's 5 Dysfunctions, that's your quickest path to improvement. And when you're suffering in kind of a misaligned leadership team.
I always warm to people who love that book, because it's the team diagnosis quiz survey at the back of the book. I've used a lot in my career for many teams, whether they were, and of course people sometimes think, well, we're not dysfunctional. No, but you could still get better. Right.
No one has a perfect score. No team would ever have a perfect score.
Yeah. So we need need alignment of leadership and a team to be effective, but then that connection to the work as well. So that's the second steps.
Yeah. I mean, the second step really is about as soon as you have direct reports in any size organizations, you have somebody working for a boss, there is some amount of autonomy that person is given. They have discretion in what work do I have to do next? What work do I have to get done by the end of the day? And what choices they make really depends on the context of why are they doing the work. Like, it really depends on, well, do I sufficiently understand the vision? And of the options available to me for work to do I understand the impact that those have? And am I connecting them correctly? And so I think there's a mindset aspect that's first and foremost in that connection, where every person, constantly revisiting, are we aligned around the direction that we're traveling? Do we understand that the choices that we have to make are aligned and in achieving that vision? And there's all kinds of frameworks that you can use. You can use rocks, you can use epics and all of these other pieces, depending on which frameworks you use. Ultimately, it's around making sure you have some type of system in place, both in the mindset and then also in the tools when you actually go, prioritize that work in a backlog.
And what have you done? Because obviously, like you said, you've had some grand transformation titles, quite rightly so, in the past. If you're leading a transformation to make improvements, the connecting the vision to the work can be hard, because that vision, that message has to filter down through the organization. And sometimes the traditional cascade is a forward in Outlook, which doesn't relate. So what? So it lands on someone's door, and I can imagine, sort of Mr. or Mrs. frontline worker going, well, that's nice. What do I do with that? So what do you do to help the tiers between the leadership and those at the front line break that down into something that actually is tangible to people at all levels, and so they can go, I now know what this means to me.
Right. I think you have to think of it as two sides of the coin. The first one is, the team has to be enrolled in why. They have to understand where you're going. And so like if you need one resource, Simon Sinek, start with why. A beautiful reason is to, it's important every person understands why the work they're doing is important. So I think there's the mindset. Mm-hmm. But that only gets you so far, because if you don't have the other side of the coin, which is the actual tools and the actual work that you're doing. So the biggest disaster is leader steps up. This is our vision. This is what we're doing. This is how we're going to tackle this new market. We're going to launch this product. It's going to be an amazing year. First quarter, here's all our grand deliverables, and it's a beautiful PowerPoint. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And then everyone turns in their chair afterwards, logs into their project management system, logs into Jira, logs into all their tools, and none of that is connected to any set of vision. So none of the actual backlogs, none of the priorities, none of the rocks, whatever vocabulary you're using in your organization is not actually connected. And so it's like, well, you can't expect for that vision to become real or to be us move towards that vision if the systems that you use, the operating system of the company, isn't actually connected to that vision. You can't expect it. And you see a lot of organizations who go, oh, well, no, but we still have our project funding, so we have to do that. And that's okay.
The one I hear a lot is, well, we told them in the town hall or by email, and it's like, what, you mean the once? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, no, they know. Yeah, they know.
I don't know, there's that statistic. I don't know how true it's scientifically based, but I think there's an element of anecdotal truthness in that. You have to tell someone 6 times just for them to actually acknowledge that they've been told, let alone before they even recall what you've been telling them.
Oh, absolutely. And for me, it's 15. Unfortunately, I'm a bit, at least at the home with the kids and my wife. I'm horrible that way. I'd like to think I'm better professionally, but no, I think it is 7. And I think that's where it's like, did they hear about it in public forums? Did they hear about it in one-on-ones? Did they talk about it at the water cooler? Do you have agents inside your organization, which are sponsored, which are like change agents, which are like, hey, we're going to get this out there and we're going to take this on because we feel our obligation for the organization to feel the same energy we do. And so you have to really think about how do you get to those contact points. But again, it just comes back to a fatal flaw is everyone then just goes back to their day job, goes to their customer tickets, goes to their project backlog, goes to their ticket backlog, goes to their portfolio, and in no way thinks about how does this actually affect my vision, because they're just kind of locked into the path that they're on.
Yeah, so I think leaders must remember that fairy dust doesn't exist, and that they actually need to, like you say, you change agents and activities to do that. So we have leadership alignments. We're connecting to the work, to the systems, their operating systems of ways of working, the tooling. They go back and they, like I say, they do their turnaround. They look at Jira or whatever they're using, and they can see the vision in the work they need to do. But now they need to do that work well.
Right. Yeah, do that work well. And you know what? Wherever they are today, that's great. But the question really is, the fundamental basis of this is, but tomorrow, could they be doing the work a little bit better? Could they be trained up and be more skilled in their work? Could they approach their work with a different mindset? Could they do some of the work that's just take some of the work away that's non-valuable? These are all questions that the teams really should get in the habit of asking. And you see that in like disciplines like Agile with the retrospective after your sprint, where you're forcing that. But I believe it isn't just a ceremony; it's a mindset. So improvement is not a ceremony; it's a mindset. And so if you had one book of like what encapsulate this, there's all kinds of ones which will tell you how in an organization to get continuous improvement, and there's frameworks and all that. But if you had one resource, Atomic Habits is one that I read a couple of years ago, and it's really about your person, your individual, understanding, how do habits form. And what that book didn't just teach me is like, what are the triggers associated with habits that I have? That's the mechanical pieces of it. But the summary of that book is yeah, but how can I look at myself every day and figure out what could I get just a little bit better? What good habits could I bake in? What could I every day look at, reflect, think about, and improve? And that's how organizations really start sustainably transforming. That's how organizations really start sustainably delivering, because they build a mindset of whatever we're doing today is great, but tomorrow is better.
And what techniques do you like to use, Charlie, to help people see the catalyst for needing to change? That's not as dramatic as your 15 years in, we went down to 4 people,
Sure.
our business is hemorrhaging customers, but that's
Right.
quite a dramatic way to force yourself to have a burning platform. It's nice if you can be proactive.
Yeah. Well, I think there's this phrase of like hitting the ceiling, of like at some point, all the skills that you have are only going to get you but so far. You're just going to hit the ceiling where you can't go out, and you're either just going to kind of go into stasis and get a little better. You may fail because you burn out, you can't get any better, or you're going to have some type of breakthrough where you learn a new skill, or you get just a little bit better, and to kind of break through that. And so I think for an individual or for a team, it's coming to the point where we realize we are working our butts off and it is not getting better. Like it's just getting worse. That's a signal you're hitting the ceiling. And so, kind of feeling, I'm just like this feeling of heaviness and this feeling of just dread or this feeling of dissatisfaction with the work that you're doing. That's the signal. That's the signal to say, look, we have got to change something.
And I suppose it's the realization as well that there has to be a better way.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, like if it's for personal life, you go in for your annual checkup and your doctor says, well, your A1C is not looking great. Well, maybe it's a measurement that you then see it and you're like, oh gosh. And professionally, it's like, look, we've only been getting to 80% of our sales targets each year, each quarter, each month, whatever your period you're looking at is. That's external signal. But you got to have those. You got to go to the doctor each year to get those measurements. You got to, in your business, you've got to have your dashboards and your scorecards to know that you're kind of missing those measurements. So it could be that it isn't just only how you feel, but it's also how you're actually performing by the numbers.
And that's what I can also imagine having a transformation agent like someone like yourself being there to not necessarily hold people's feet to the fire, but to be a fresh pair of eyes who's not stuck in the day-to-day with them, to sort of say, well, this is what I notice.
Yeah.
These are patterns that work. Is there something that we could do better?
Maybe it's like an accountability partner,
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if I've never really heard that phrase before, but it's like, look, do you want to get better? Okay. Usually you need somebody who's going to help you be accountable for that, right? Somebody's going to ride alongside you. Somebody who's going to be there to support you, be there to show you the dashboard, be there to point out and identify when things aren't going as well and you can't see it yourself. Be there to create that moment in the room where vulnerability-based trust breaks through because someone finally says what needed to be said and no one was able to forever. And they have that moment of trust where they go, you know what? I'm just going to say it. Glenn just talks over me all the time and I'm sick and tired of it.
Yeah, sorry about that, dude.
Yeah. Well, you haven't yet, actually. So it was a very bad example.
I'm on my best behavior.
Fair. That was buried deep inside, I guess.
Yeah. Let it all out, Charlie. Let it all out.
Let it go.
So during those 3 steps, you've talked about some great reads that people can have to help people through that process.
Yeah.
But in addition to, books are great, but not everyone's a reader. What are there any models or frameworks or processes that you like to use, or your go-to ones, or ones that you've experienced that you want to share with people of things they can contemplate using?
Well, I mean, so frameworks. Boy, we could do a whole chat about frameworks. I mean, you and I met actually with Skilled Agile. That was the framework we were using when we first met each other, and If you put all of them in a box, I think the ones that work best are the ones that have a kind of their built-in reflection. The whole point of them is to operate, but then to observe the operations, look at them and make them a little bit better, right? Periods of they call it was it blue work and red work, or there's different team. There's all kinds of models around like what is that? You're actively doing work versus you're reflecting on that work. And what I love about models is they really do three things. One, the first one is in general, you get a sense of reality. Like if you use it, you're going to see what's going on. The two is they drive accountability and they force you to write things down. They force you to have discipline in the work that you do. And three, you get common language. People stop talking past each other. So you get a real efficiency, right? So sense of reality, it drives accountability in the organization and shared language. And that for any reason alone, I love models. And so what's funny is people go, Charlie, what's your favorite framework? Well, first of all, I don't really have all that many favorites in my life. I love the situation I'm in for various reasons. But any model really will bring those three things. The ones that are the simplest to follow and the simplest to use, I do have a preference for.
Sure.
Ones that get overly complicated really can start slipping into the dark side.
The dark side.
The dark side of frameworks.
Dum dum dum.
The setup. Well,
so tell me more about the dark side.
Well, so if you get a framework and you're using it, and everybody in the organization is drinking from the water fountain, we're all together, singing from the same hymn book. What can start to happen to these three incredible, powerful things of reality, accountability, and community of, simplification of language, is all of a sudden everyone in their little division, it's like the scientists and the elephant. If you know that image where a bunch of scientists have blindfolds on, they're standing there with the elephant, and I'll just pretend. And one of them is like holding the tail, and it's like, oh, it's a rope, and then the other one's like grabbing the ear of the elephant, and it's like, oh, it's a blanket. And they all see the same thing, this elephant, very differently because of their area. And so what can happen is everyone starts to fracture into their own reality, but they have this false confidence that the framework told them they're all, and so they don't realize they're drifting away outside of alignment. So that's the first one. And then I think the second one is around the accountability is all of a sudden people fall back on the process of the framework, not the intent, where you can really hide from accountability. If you overuse the process, you hide from it. It's really fascinating to watch happen. And then around the community, if you have shared language, all of a sudden people start to then weaponize it. They start quoting scripture, right? I don't need to talk to us about the Bible and how if we were to follow every single word in the Bible, our head would blow up because there is some conflicting instructions. Well, any framework, as soon as you really get into it and start trading on those words, same thing happens and you start to weaponize it.
Yeah. And interesting enough, you say weaponizing it. This afternoon, I was looking on LinkedIn and there was yet another framework, process, war threads having taken a lot of traction. And yes, it's like two very entrenched factions fighting each other with words. Mine's better than yours. And no one wins.
I'm glad you went the route of talking about frameworks as opposed to talking about holy war. Thank you for moving in a safer direction.
Yeah, but like you say, I mean, a model or framework is in itself, like a transformation, is a means to an end. It's to improve the underlying operations of a business to get the results the business tries to achieve. That's why you do it.
That's right.
End of.
Well, I mean, and you have to realize every company has an operating system. Like, how are they running? Like, how do we manage our people? How do we manage our vision? How do we manage the roles and responsibilities? How do we ensure that our vision, is getting traction and the teams are actually doing that work on a day-to-day basis? Everybody has an operating system. Like, they just you don't call it that. And so the art is to set up something which is as light as possible, so you don't slip into the dark side, but is powerful enough that it captivates and works across the organization. It captivates the interest of everyone in the organization and works. And so I think in the last few years, I think there's a model that's emerging, the Entrepreneur's Operating System, or EOS. I think it's threading the needle really well around being robust enough that it works, but light enough that you don't slip into the dark side, just as a result of using it after a period of time.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah. With the Entrepreneur's Operating System, what's so cool is like anybody can use it. Like if you want to, you go read the book Traction by Gino Wickman, and everything's laid out in there of what you need to do. Now, is the leadership team going to have the ability to have the vulnerability-based trust to actually use it well? Maybe, maybe not. And that's why there's a role for coaches to come in and visit with the leadership team to help them. There's no doubt that sometimes when you use EOS, you have, it's called an implementer. They basically come in and coach on an as-needed basis, at least quarterly, for that leadership team. But what I love about EOS, though, is that it's so accessible to accompany 5 people, 50 people, 500 people, start to get up to divisions or groups within organizations.
Okay.
It still really does work.
So it's relevant at scale and all sorts of scales as well, by the sound of it.
Yeah, it is, because it covers the basics of a company, right? It covers what's your vision, right? What's your people? Do they are in the right seat? It covers your data. Perfect. Covers all of your processes. And it covers your traction of like where are you actually going in the organization, and are you actually getting the work done on a day-to-day basis? So, like any organization is going to have those needs. So
absolutely.
It's a full suite, and it isn't all that invasive in that you were doing these things already. You just do them a bit more efficiently. You get a little bit better.
So it sounds like it's a evolutionary way of working rather than a revolutionary, let's bring in a new way of working.
Yeah, I mean, I think it can be invasive if you have a dysfunctional team. Like if you just, if you have no org chart and you don't document your processes and you think that that's going to be great for your organization down the road, well, maybe EOS isn't there for you, because it is going to hold you accountable to like, okay, we need a responsibility chart. Okay, we need to write down our 90-day goals. Okay, we need to track every 90 days. Oh, no, every week, how we're progressing on those goals. So it introduces that accountability, one of the key parts of frameworks that I just love.
Yeah, I think the frameworks I've used and models, etc., that accountability and making that transparent, because you cited earlier that, as a leader, you don't always have access to the information you want is really powerful. And actually, sometimes some of the resistance to that is for people who like to hide. And so they resist the change, not because of the change, which is human nature to be worried about change, but like to hide behind the existing ways of working, which are maybe.
I agree with you for some people, but I would say there are people who look exactly like that who aren't trying to hide. They're just trying to get their job done. They're just like,
leave me alone.
Leave me alone. You've given me far too much work to do. You've given me insufficient resources to get those done. And you are in no way respectful of the fact that I have some job to do. So get away from my desk. Stop bothering me. And, there are situations where all of us face that situation, and that's appropriate response of like, let me get my work done. No doubt. But I think when you find that that's the pattern day in and day out, that's a sign of something else. That's a sign of insufficient identification of the responsibilities in the organization. That's a sign of insufficient processes that are being used and followed by all. So, you have to be careful, be respectful of folks that find themselves under stress, but then also intervene or create the space where you can intervene so that, we got to solve something bigger here. This is more than just somebody wanting to get their job done. There's something good. There's something afoot. Yeah.
And I think also acknowledging the fact that they are passionate about wanting to make their part of the world a better place. And actually, from that reflective improvement activity, they can be great people to get on board to do that.
Harness that. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. They clearly care. They clearly care about the outcomes and about the organization and getting their work done. So connect with that. harness that
Brilliant.
and bring it into the organization.
So, I like, Charlie, how you've helped sort of that narrative of, that sort of, taking us through the starting off with alignment of leadership and connecting that work to the vision, to the work that people are doing, and then making sure we're doing a good job, and then giving people lots of good tips. Little Birdie tells me that you're also writing a book. Is that right?
Oh, I don't know. It might be. Yeah. I'm a little scared too, right? Because I've been married 25 years. I'm like, well, if I get divorced, this book won't really. It's called How Agile Saved My Marriage. That's one of the books I'm thinking about writing. And of course, my wife, she's upstairs. She's just rolling her eyes right now. But I think why I've thought about this book is around that self-reflection piece. Around work studying, understanding is the work you're doing in the direction of, in service of the people around you. How are you affecting the people around you? There's so much I learned in just planning a day, planning my week, planning how I'm working with my wife, how I'm working, how I'm supporting my kids. That, I thought might be fun to write a book about that experience. I had some other ideas, but that's the one at the top of the heap right now.
I like it. I'm convinced it'd be a bestseller.
It could be a bestseller, but maybe it'd be even bestseller if we end up getting divorced. Who knows what 5 or 10 years. Hopefully my wife won't be tired of me by then. She's sometimes tells me she's a little exhausted by me. So,
well, if you write the book, it's a sign of commitment that you've got. I'm here for the long term.
That's to Damned with the Wedding Vows. It was the book that made me commit.
That'll do it. Shame. Oh, poor Mrs. Charlie.
Yeah.
Very
she
good.
has a hard life.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, thank you very much for your time today, Charlie. It's been a pleasure to chat to you as always, and help explore some of these topics for transformation and making operations as amazing as they can be. Where can people find you if they want to reach out and say hello?
I'm just on LinkedIn, Charles Fleet. I'm kind of the only one out there, or just email me, charlesfleet@hotmail.com. I'm always there, and I'm always happy for a chat. Not only for the recorded bit, but just personal ones that aren't recorded either. Those are fun too. So
fabulous. Well, thank you very much for your time today, Charlie.
Thanks, Glenn.
Thank you so much for tuning into the show. I hope you've enjoyed it. I know I've had fun making it. I'd be thrilled to hear your feedback or suggestions for topics you'd like me to explore. Email the show at podcast@nimbility.co. You can also check out all the other episodes in the series at nimbility.co/podcast. If you've enjoyed the content, it would mean a lot to us if you could subscribe and rate the show in your podcast app. Your support helps others discover the show and allows us to keep spreading the word. So until next time, thanks for listening.